Joe, you're a liar, and in this video I'm going to point out how. So hey guys, thanks for stopping by. My name is Jeff, this is Jeff Tech Channel, and today I want to talk to you about the press conference that most of us have already been made aware of that occurred yesterday, where Joe Biden came out with his plans for executive actions on gun control. So I watched the whole video, I took notes while I was watching the video, and I want to bring up some of the more egregious lies and talk about some of the other points. This is going to be a fairly long video, so please bear with me. There'll be different sections where I talk about different timestamps, and I'll have reference links in the video description below. So let's get started. So the very first thing Joe Biden does when he comes out and starts his press conference is he talks about how no rights are unlimited. Now, where he's getting that from is in the Heller versus DC decision. Justice Scalia mentioned that the Second Amendment is not limited and that there are limits that are placed on the right of the people to keep and bear arms. What he's talking about, though, is he's talking about legitimate exceptions to weapons that are not in common use. And he uses the terms in common use. Well, I think it's arguable enough to say that a pistol brace or an AR-15 is in common use. So when he's talking about the no right being unlimited, that's where he's getting that from. Now, he also talks about the analogy that we've seen used far too often, where you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Now, I've referenced this in other videos previously. You can yell fire in a crowded theater. If there's a fire in the crowded theater and you need to get people out of that theater, you can yell fire. It's not against the law to yell fire. What they're saying is you can't make statements that would be used to cause a stampede that would cause harm to others. There's a difference in the two. And so that's related to the First Amendment. In the Second Amendment, they reference weapons that are not in common use, mentally challenged people, fully automatic weapons and that sort of thing. So there are limits in the Heller decision, but to compare it to the First Amendment and yelling fire in a crowded theater, I don't think it's a legitimate comparison. And I'll have links to that decision in the description below, like I mentioned earlier. So crime is an epidemic, right? That's another term that he used a little bit into the video. Well, what is an epidemic? An epidemic, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is a widespread occurrence of an infectious disease in a community at a particular time. Now, I think that's a misuse of the term. It's used for inflammatory purposes. They start labeling things as epidemics, then it starts to get people to perk their ears up and find out, what's going on? What's this new epidemic? Especially in the age of COVID-19 and SARS and MERS and all these other infectious diseases that are going around. To use the term epidemic is simply a hyperbolic term in order to try to make this problem seem worse than it really is. He goes on and he starts mumbling about the victims of shootings, of crimes. And he goes through and he lists these names and he lists these events that we've all become familiar with over exaggerated reporting in the media. But the one thing that he doesn't do while he's listing off these names of dead folks and their egregious violence that's been perpetrated against them, he doesn't point out the fact that every single one of these instances was a gun-free zone, right? We know gun-free zones are targets of the mentally deranged because they know they're not going to find a fight there. They're going to find victims there. And what do we know about these people? They're weak, detached from reality. They don't have any place in society. They're mad, they're angry, and they're lashing out. And where do they want to do this? How do they want to do this? In their sad, pathetic minds, they want to be immortalized, and they know that the media and the government is going to make them immortals. You're going to be able to go to a Wikipedia page and look up every mass shooting and know who the perpetrator is and know the body counts that are associated with every single one of those. These people know that the media loves violence and they love a tragedy, and they're going to report it and immortalize their useless souls forever. Whether they live or die after the event, they're going to be forever remembered. I think the problem is gun-free zones and the immortalization of these people and making them infamous. That's something that isn't ever talked about, but that could be definitely actions that the government could take to try to resolve these issues. Remove these gun-free zones. Create a path where a citizen has as much liberty to carry a firearm as a sworn peace officer. Why not create some sort of program like that where you don't have to be paid employee of the government to have the same rights and privileges that a police officer has? What is it that police officers have that you and I don't have? They have more training, they've sworn an oath. Well, I've got the training and I've sworn an oath. Why can't I carry into a school as a private citizen? Well, I can't because the law says I can't, because I'm not a paid employee of a police department in some municipality somewhere. I think that's where some of this focus could change and shift, and I think we could see a lot more reduction in these mass crimes if more people were able to carry in these locations. About 10 minutes into the video, he starts talking about taking executive action because Congress is delaying. Well, why is Congress delaying? He's got a Democratic House, he's got a 50-50 split in the Senate, so why is Congress delaying? They've only passed 2-3 bills out of the House of Representatives. Why is it that they're not passing more and more of these bills that are sitting in committee? Well, I can tell you, in my opinion, I think the reason that they're not passing the House is because the House of Representatives doesn't have a unified consensus on Joe Biden's policies when it comes to gun control. I think Joe Biden is more of a radical when it comes to gun control, and it's not supported by the people or the representatives in the House. So I think Joe Biden is trying to do this because he knows that the Congress doesn't support this. And I think that's some insight into what's going on in the inner workings of the House of Representatives right now, and I think that bodes in our favor. We need to keep supporting the efforts to oppose gun control and keep supporting these gun rights organizations that are advocating for our rights at every turn. Even $1 helps. Every little bit goes a long way. He goes on to speak about ghost guns. Well, it's legal to make something in your own home for your own personal use. We see these 80% lowers that he talks about, these kits that you can get online, and how they're not registered or serialized. Well, if 80% becomes the limit for manufacturing of a product, you're going to see that change from 80% to 79% or 75% or 50%. I mean, you can't take a block of aluminum or a roll of plastic filament from a printer and say you now have to register this piece of plastic or this piece of aluminum because it could potentially turn into a gun. The only thing that I could see that they do here is make owning or manufacturing something for your own personal use as a crime. So let me know in the comments section, what do you guys think would be the potential legislative efforts around that? I don't think that Joe Biden has that power or has that ability. He may be able to try to define something, but I think these companies that are selling these kits are just going to reduce the percentage of what's already enabled so that an individual can continue to make these things at home. I mean, seriously, you can go to Lowe's and buy a piece of pipe and a nail and make a 12-gauge zip gun with very little knowledge of anything at all. So what they're trying to do here, I think this is just more show for the cameras than it is actually something that could be legislated and actually approved. So firearms trafficking and online sales, ghost guns trafficking, Justice Department annual report. This is a money grab. This is just a way to allocate funds to organizations that can use the money to expand their ability to do research. This is a way to get funding back to some of these private nonprofit organizations that do research and collect data. Now, be careful with this one. It may seem pretty harmless on the surface, but what they'll do is they'll use the data that they collect to manipulate the message that gets presented. Facts don't lie, but liars use facts, and they're going to use these statistics. We've seen the Uniform Crime Report statistics have been the FBI has been collecting this data for a long time, and we get a lot of useful data out of this about who the criminals are and who their victims are, and we see them try to use that information not always to their benefit in trying to report crime and who perpetrators and victims are. For other uses, they're just going to try to expand upon that. Now, 13 minutes into the video, this is where it starts really getting kind of juicy, right? This is one where, Joe Biden doesn't have any limitations about standing on the bodies of the dead to try to further an agenda. And he calls out the Colorado shooting that we saw, a couple days, a week or two ago, where believed that the perpetrator in that crime used a Ruger pistol, an AR pistol with a pistol brace on it. Now, what he wants to do is he wants to remove the ability, and I'm going to use some props here. He wants to remove the ability from the private owner to use an AR-15 with a pistol brace on this, and he says that it's more lethal, right? So here's an AR pistol, and I just want to hold this up next to a rifle that shoots the AR round. This is a IWI Tavor X95, right? So this is a Tavor 95, and this shoots the same round as the AR-15, uses the same magazines and everything. The only difference is one is legally classified as a pistol and one is legally classified as a rifle. This one is configured with a 16-inch barrel in a bullpup configuration. It is the exact same length as this guy, that's configured to shoot the same rifle round, or the same intermediate cartridge, the AR-15 round, the 5.56 round, you can see it here, very small bullet, in a 10-inch barrel. So they're saying this is more lethal than this based off of what? You can conceal this? Well, you can conceal this too. I mean, I just don't understand where they're getting at with that. You know, one is not any more lethal than the other. I mean, it could be argued that the pistol is less lethal than the rifle because of the velocities and the terminal effects of the round. But you can see here, this is the, let's see if I can bring that up for you. Yeah, you can see here, this is the AR round. This is a 5.56 bullet. It's no different coming out of a pistol than it is out of a rifle. They're both the same size, they're both the same length, they're both the same lethality. But for some unknown reason, Joe Biden has decided to make one more deadly than the other. Now, I would argue also, what does lethality mean? Are you less dead if you're killed with a hammer than you are if you're killed with a bullet? Lethality, is that on a sliding scale of what's more lethal to you than something else? If you're dead, you're dead. Your lethality is a terminal effect. I don't understand why they use this more lethal. I think it's more hyperbolic language than anything. Anyway, I think the pistol braces is a lost cause. I don't think they're going to be able to get that one to stand scrutiny, but we'll see. Tell me in the comments section, what do you guys think? Is that something that we could probably see actually make it through onto the NFA? You tell me. I don't think so, but you know, I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say. So he starts to move into, about 15 minutes into the press conference, he starts moving into things that are emotionally charged, things that he thinks that are going to make an impact on the gun control effort or on the crime effort to reduce gun crime. And he starts talking about funding for red flag laws. He starts talking about suicide numbers and how guns are used in suicides. If you look at the numbers, out of the 30,000 people that die every year, well over half of those are suicides. So, you know, he's trying to prevent suicides. Well, what he doesn't understand is a determined person who wants to commit suicide is going to use another mean. This is just one method of committing suicide. There's a multitude of ways people can commit suicide. He starts talking about women getting murdered and how we need to pass more gun laws because we know that restraining orders don't work and a determined assailant is going to murder the victim. Instead of creating another law that a person is going to violate, why don't we empower women to be more self-defenders and encourage women to take up ownership of firearms and be responsible gun owners so that they can defend themselves if they ever get into a situation where they have to defend themselves. Empowering women is a liberal mindset, but in Joe Biden's mind, empowering government to protect women is his mindset. And I don't know, you tell me, is that sexist or not? Sounds very sexist to me. Then he goes in to talk about black and brown people and how homicides rates in the black and brown communities are higher and government is the solution because obviously Joe Biden thinks that black and brown people can't protect themselves and they're not intelligent or smart enough or capable enough to be their own self-defenders. They have to rely on government to protect them from themselves. I think that's racist as shit, but you tell me. I don't know. I didn't like that one at all. And I think that we see this out of Joe Biden more than we see this out of a lot of other people. That black and brown people are incapable of protecting themselves, so Joe Biden has to do it for them. He goes and talks about legislation that's already in process. He's trying to stump for more legislation. He talks about the gun checks. He talks about the background checks at gun shows. We know that's a blatant lie. We know that retail sellers of firearms at gun shows have to do background checks. What he's focused on is the private individual who would sell his own personal wares at a gun show or at any location, whether it be in his own home or somebody else. These are guns that are already owned by private citizens. He wants to know that those guns are being transferred from one person to another, and he wants a record of that through a 4473 and some sort of FFL background check, or some sort of background check through the NICS check system. So, again, this is one of those situations where should they be allowed to remove private transfer of privately owned products, whether it be this cell phone or this battery or a firearm? Is it the government's business to know my property and where my property is going? You tell me in the comment section. I don't personally think it's Joe's business or anybody in government's business. I bought the product. I was a legal gun owner who purchased a device, and I sold this following all of the laws that were in place at the time. Person's a resident of the state that I live in, and he knows if he's a prohibited possessor or not. It's not my responsibility to determine that. But you tell me, should we run all private sales of guns through the government? He goes on to talk about Violence Against Women's Act, that more laws to protect women instead of empowering women. I think I've talked about that one already. He mentions the assault weapons ban and the ability of the private owner to own 100, this is his terms, 100 rounds, bullets. No one needs that. Well, I say bullshit, Joe. It's none of your business what I own. Until you provide me a Secret Service agent to follow me and my family around the world, I'll get to determine how I defend my family, and it's none of your damn business. So the last thing that he talks about while he's stumping for future gun control legislation is the ability to sue gun manufacturers. Now, we know that's a blatant lie. If a gun manufacturer produces an object, if a gun company puts this product out and they put it out knowing that there's a defect in the manufacturer that could cause harm to someone, then I absolutely can sue that manufacturer. If they make a barrel that doesn't withstand the pressures, or they make a lower that's going to explode, or the rounds are manufactured to have too much of a charge and they cause a catastrophic failure of the firearm that causes injury or death, they're liable for that manufacturing defect. But what Joe wants to do is he wants to make them liable for misuse. So if I take a gun, or somebody takes a gun out and they take it into a school and they commit a murder in that school, he wants to make the gun manufacturers liable for that misuse of that product. He's trying to make it so trial lawyers can sue these companies out of business, and we know that that's an egregious abuse of the legislative option or legal powers by these advocate lawyers that are out there. And they needed this law. They had to pass this law to protect these manufacturers from these lawyers that would sue these companies out of existence. And then the very last thing, we know that Joe Biden stands up there at the podium and he talks about how all of these legislative efforts, all of these executive action efforts are intended to keep people safe. And we know that government doesn't keep people safe. So that's it, guys. That was the entire press conference and my comments on the entire thing. I think it was an attempt by Joe Biden to speak to his promoters and the people that helped get him elected into office and let them know that he is doing something in the first 100 days, that he's paying back their efforts. He's paying back their donations and their support to get him elected. I think a lot of it is just feel-good efforts. And you tell me, do you think any of this has a chance? Do you think that we'll actually see executive actions that will impact gun ownership? Will the pistol brace actually get onto the ATF's radar and become a restricted NFA item? You tell me in the comments section. I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. So with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for making it this far. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Please follow me on my other social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, MeWe, Bitchute, Parler, and on Rumble. Give me a like if you haven't done so. I'd really appreciate that as well. And until next time, guys, stay vigilant, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.